What should the expectations be in the sophomore season for Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos? Can the Colorado Rockies avoid a dreaded three-peat in Major League Baseball? All of that and more to come on today's rundown, and we start with the NFL. As it relates to Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos, they, I would say, outpaced their projections in a lot of categories as it relates to how we thought they would do with Bo Nix, who, again, was the sixth quarterback taken off the board in the first round, was evaluated by many who take the profession very seriously to be a non-first round talent, definitely in the second and sometimes even third round as a draft prospect. And they turned that season into a surprising and overall pretty satisfying 10-7 year, breaking the streak of consecutive losing seasons that the Broncos had seen since 2016 when Trevor Siemian had control of the reins here in Denver. Think about that. And made the playoffs for the first time since the Sheriff helped them raise the Lombardi Trophy back in 2015. So that begs the question, what now? What's next? We saw a team like the Houston Texans who definitely surged in C.J. Stroud's rookie season, significantly more so than the quarterback taken just one pick ahead of him in Carolina in Bryce Young. But in the sophomore season, it seemed to kind of scale back a little bit. They were still a contender for the postseason, but it just felt like there was maybe a little bit of regression there, despite the fact that they had brought in other pieces around him, like Joe Mixon, and they went and got Stephon Diggs, etc. So, based on what we know about rookie quarterbacks in the NFL and how difficult it can be to continue a hot start once the rest of the league, that if anything is very good at catching up and playing on to trends from year to year, game to game, week to week. So what will the defense against Bo Nix look like in his sophomore season? I think he caught a lot of people by surprise with his athleticism, with his ability to run the football and use his legs to manipulate the pocket, etc. But I don't think anyone's going to be caught surprised by Bo Nix now. I think he kind of made his shot across the bow, and he's got the rest of the league's attention. So I guess the question that I want to ask all of you, and I want to hear your responses at the end of the show, is where's the bar? Where is the bar for the Denver Broncos and Bo Nix? 10-7 is where they finished. Is a second consecutive 10-7 season okay? Does it have to be 11 or more? Is a wild card berth okay? Do they need to reach a certain point in the postseason, a la the conference championship, etc.? Or is there potentially a world where maybe the Broncos can go 9-8, still a winning season on paper, although not as good as last year? And it's still acceptable. It wouldn't be considered a failure despite being one win less than what they experienced last year. I will tell you until then, while you formulate your responses, where I stand on the subject, and that is I think that I would be disappointed if they won less games than they did last year, even if it's a winning season at 9-8, because there's levels to disappointment. Okay. You can be disgusted or you can be bummed. And I think I would be a little bit bummed if they went 9-8 in the same way that I would have been a little bit bummed last season if they had gone 9-8 and still found a way to back into the playoffs, or if they had mismanaged the final game stretch of the season there and missed the playoffs, but broke the streak of consecutive losing seasons that was so painful year in and year out. So could you, I guess, if you pin me down and just really hammered away the point that if they were to go 10-7 again for a second consecutive season, that would be less disappointing. But no, I think you've got a rookie quarterback. You outpace your projection. But just because that's true doesn't mean that I'm automatically willing to give a lot of grace from a regression standpoint. It just means that our evaluation of where you were going to be was not where it should have been. So that's an observational error on our end as a fan base, as a media conglomerate, etc., nationally and locally, and it just recalibrates the expectation. And in some ways that's not fair, but in a lot of ways life's not fair. So I'm going to put, in terms of for me to be truly satisfied with the Broncos regular season in 2025, 2026, I think it's not unreasonable or unfair to say, hey, this should be an 11-win football team. That's exactly where the Los Angeles Chargers were a year ago, just one game better than you, good for second in the division. And their postseason aspirations didn't plan out the way that they wanted to either. But that seems okay to me. And I understand you can sit there and say, well, hey, wait a minute. They caught some green lights. The defense outpaced its projections. We had the same conversations about the defense in Russell Wilson's last year with the Broncos when they had that just insane turnover streak throughout that chunk of games in the middle and toward the back end of the season that helped propel them to some wins that maybe if you were to play that game, 2, 3, 4, 5 more times, it doesn't shake out that way. Well, okay. But that's not the case. You can simulate things to death. And if it didn't happen this, it would happen this. My point is, I know that they caught some breaks, but they also fought through some adversity. Did they get to play the NFC South, which we all thought between Tampa Bay and Atlanta, especially New Orleans and Carolina would be a little bit better. New Orleans came out of the gate on fire and then looked kind of hapless toward the end. The Atlanta Falcons had the ultimate offseason arms race, bringing in Kirk Cousins alongside Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. And then you had the X Factor heir apparent in Michael Penix Jr., and they kind of petered out toward the end. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were kind of mercurial up and down all season long, starting hot, fading, finishing strong, with Mike Evans eclipsing another 1,000-yard season consecutively as his career continues to roll on. So did they catch some breaks that maybe the NFC South wasn't as good as we thought? And that took up 4 of their 17 games and they swept it? Yes. Okay, that's fair. But they also had to deal with Bo Nix as a rookie quarterback, drinking through a fire hose for Sean Payton, who has one of the more complex and intricate offensive schemes in the National Football League. And it started with them losing a couple of games right at the start of the season that I think they should have won in the Steelers and the Seahawks. Now they beat the Buccaneers right after that when the Buccaneers were kind of still on the climb, and they beat a Jets team that shockingly wasn't as bad then as they were toward the end of the season. And we've seen how it's gone there in New York. So I think that, yes, they might not catch all the same green lights. They might not get to say play the same hapless kind of NFC South conglomerate, and their opponents might be a little bit different, or, they got away with they had a fluky touchdown here or an interception there. That's great. But you also have Bo Nix having another full offseason with Sean Payton. You're going to presumably bring in pieces around him, both on the offensive side of the ball as far as skill positions go, and on the defensive side of the ball to help Vance Joseph bolster and try to maintain that level of excellence that we saw from the defense, particularly from the pass rushing unit and the secondary. So I think that when you balance those things out on a scale, it's not unreasonable to say, hey, I think this should be an 11-win season. And I think sometimes during the losing streak that we saw with the Broncos, we as Broncos country and Broncos fans, we may have been a little bit harsh, especially in the early going on the Broncos, because Denver is a town that has significant championship pedigree in the sport of football, and there's high expectations that come with that. And those were set forth by the Bolin ownership group and others who at one point during Bolin's tenure, while he was still, in principal control of the team, they had more Super Bowl appearances than losing seasons. So I understand that. And I think that while we needed to back off of that a little bit, especially as the doldrums continued, and it was just this revolving door between executive, coach, quarterback, just team turnover at every single level year after year after year, we had to kind of scale our expectations back a little bit and really strip this thing down to the studs. But they kind of did that to a certain degree. They committed to the rookie quarterback rebuild. And now I think it's okay if you're seeing more progress out of the gate in year one than you thought to hit the gas a little bit. Okay. And like I said, I don't think it's a disappointment in a significant sense if they were to repeat, but I think 11 wins and onward for the Denver Broncos, I think is an acceptable expectation. And we'll see how close the floor for the team is to that. Another team that has quite possibly the lowest expectations that I think you could imagine is the Colorado Rockies. And yes, this is going to be a rare moment where we have a meaningful conversation about the Colorado Rockies. And the question I have for all of you is, can they avoid an unfortunate Major League Baseball three-peat? And by that, I mean a third consecutive season where their loss column eclipses the number 100 as it has for the past 2 seasons. They have, by large accounts, been in the Major League Baseball basement for a handful of years now. And what's crazy is up until last season, the Rockies had made the postseason more frequently or more recently than the Broncos, which, again, things that you say out loud now, looking at it here in 2025, that you just couldn't believe to be true, but it was. So as it relates to the Colorado Rockies, if they're going to avoid a three-peat and a third consecutive 100-plus loss season, they are going to need some help and some contribution from a young core that we've seen the Rockies have semblances of before it just inevitably splinters, scatters, and those players go on to make meaningful contributions for bigger market teams like the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Cardinals, etc. But you've got Ezekiel Tovar, you've got Brenton Doyle, you've got Michael Toglia. They're going to get hopefully Marquez back, who's looking good so far, as pitchers and catchers reported just a little over a week ago. You're going to get some strong pitching back. You're going to expect development and continuity as it relates to some of the young talent that they have on the roster. But at the end of the day, there's a pretty ugly contract sitting out there in right field, and that is of Chris Bryant. And Jim Rome invited Rocky skipper Bud Black onto his show just earlier this week, and Bud had some comments about the expectations for Chris Bryant as he's going into his 4th season with the Rockies. Bud told Jim, quote, "We need him. He was an MVP in this league. He's a World Series champion. He's still in his early 30s, and there's a lot of baseball left. I'm not going to say we're crossing our fingers, but I'm really feeling good about this one. So let's hope that's the case." Boy, isn't just that the vote of confidence that you want to hear from a coach about one of the high-profile star players on your team, is that I'm not going to say we're crossing our fingers that our $27 million per year player who's halfway through a 7-year contract is going to be able to pull some weight, but that's where we're at as it relates to 20th and Blake and Chris Bryant. And I know you're thinking to yourself, how can we have a year from Chris Bryant? All he does is sit on the IL and collect a check year after year after year. And you would be right. But Bud Black had some thoughts on that too, as it relates to Chris Bryant's early performance thus far and how he's managing the injuries that have plagued him over the last couple of seasons. He told Jim, quote, "The back issues are something he's going to have to manage, but I think for the first time in his career, he truly realizes that a regimented program in the wintertime is necessary. But he looks great." He went on to make comments about how Chris Bryant getting in the cage and popping some balls off. He looks clean. He looks good. He looks strong. And the power that he feels like was lacking and that he wasn't able to maximize due to the back injuries is coming back, and seemed really excited about it. But to me, the first thing that I heard there was that for the first time in Chris Bryant's career, he's going into his 12th season, I believe, in Major League Baseball. He's completed 11 seasons. For the first time, he realizes that a wintertime regimen in order to maintain his health throughout the slog of a 162-game season is necessary. The first time ever? I mean, this was a guy who was National League MVP in 2016, and he was a World Series champion with the Chicago Cubs. So again, just like I don't think I want to hear my manager, my coach, my whatever say that he's crossing his fingers that my star player is going to be able to star play, I don't know that I want to hear a guy who has been in the Major League Baseball for 11 seasons and who has won a championship and won an MVP say for the first time in his career, he realizes that he's got to do a little bit more maintenance in the wintertime to be able to slog through, the doldrums of a long Major League Baseball season. I probably would have just skipped that part if I was Bud Black and if I was Chris Bryant to my head coach. And it's crazy when you really break down the nuances of Chris Bryant's tenure here in Colorado. As I mentioned, we're 3 seasons in to a 7-year deal where his average annual salary is north of $27 million. Chris Bryant has been available for 159 out of a possible 486 games for the Colorado Rockies. That's a 32% clip. So to quote Anchorman, the saying 60% of the time, it works every time. I guess for Chris Bryant, 32% of the time, It really doesn't ever work, because if you look at the 593 at-bats that Chris Bryant has been able to step up to the plate as a member of the Colorado Rockies, if you compare those at-bats to the salary that he has earned thus far over the last 3 years, where I think he made 18 million, 28 million, and 28 million, that comes out to, pause for effect, $124,789.21 every single time Chris Bryant has stepped up to the plate. I mean, 124,000, just under $125,000 to step up to the plate. I'm not even talking about hitting. That includes strikeouts. I will kick myself every day when I wake up for the rest of my life that I did not put myself in a position to have that kind of pay structure and job security set up like Chris Bryant has found here in Colorado, who, by the way, we still have 4 more years of this Chris Bryant contract at $27 million a year. And shocker, he has a full no trade clause. Not that anyone would really want to probably absorb him at this rate, but even if the Rockies wanted to try to pull a Nolan Arenado and just attach, the GDP of a small country to the trade deal in order to push another star player out of town, he would have to approve that first. So I say all of that to say, I actually think the Rockies are going to avoid this three-peat, despite the Chris Bryant nonsense that has gone on for the last 3 years. And even regardless of whether or not he returns to whatever we want to consider true form for a former MVP and World Series champion who's going to be turning 31 or 32, I believe, over the course of this year. Even without that, I think that the young core of Tovar and Doyle and Toglia, who I think could be in for, if I was to pick like a sneaky surprise breakout kind of candidate for the Rockies in 2025, I think Toglia would be high on my list. Combined with the fact that they're going to get some pitching back, and as long as they can maintain that, and go through the same kind of issues that they have as far as being a pitcher at altitude and playing at Coors Field, etc., I do think that the Rockies, if you told me over under on 99.5 losses for the Rockies, I'm taking the under. I think that they beat this three-peat, and even if it's at 99 by the hair of their chins, I think they avoid it. All right, that's enough Rockies, I think, for today. A nice palate cleanser, I think, to end the show would be, we have a hockey game tonight. The Four Nations Face-Off Championship, Team USA, Team Canada, round 2, tonight at 6 p.m. on ESPN, ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, whatever litany of streaming services that I'm sure we've all collected at this point. You got a lot of opportunities to see it, and I do believe it will be must-watch television. But I do think it'll be different must-watch television than it was the first time. And I think this is going to be an interesting dynamic that we see unfold between the two teams. Obviously, the first time around that they played during the early portion of the round-robin format, there was a lot of angst. There was some bad blood. There was some anthem booing. There was some animosity, as there always is when you infuse national pride, nationalism into a best-on-best tournament format like we see in the Olympics every 4 years, or every 2 years, I guess, between winter and summer. And 3 fights in 9 seconds. The Kachuk brothers dropping the gloves. JT Miller getting, bless his heart, doing his best job against someone who was clearly bigger than him. But still getting in there to scrap it up nonetheless. You saw the physicality, not being afraid to go lay the wood on Connor McDavid from Charlie McAvoy and et cetera. I don't know that we're going to see that again this time, because those moments in that first game were to send a message. And I think that message has been sent. This is a championship game, and I'm not going to say they're going to skate out there and just kind of piddle paddle around. I mean, these guys are still going to go full bore and go 100%, but I think it's going to be more calculated this time, because the playing field is not quite the same that it was before. Team Canada did not have Cale Makar for portions of this tournament because of an illness. He will be back now. They're not dealing with very significant levels of injury, but the United States is. If you look at the United States injuries, obviously the aforementioned Charlie McAvoy will be out. And then the Kachuk brothers, who are going to play, and, those guys, because of the way that they're wired, they'll step in front of a microphone like we see a lot of athletes do and tell you, hey, 100% fine. We're good to go. We're saving all of our energy for this game. That's why we played limited minutes, blah, 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 all that. But listen, they're hurt. They're going to play hurt, and that's not a new thing for hockey players, and it's certainly not a new thing for these two individuals in general. But we think that they're dealing with a hip and a knee, respectively. You never know for sure, because hockey is just the most fascinating sport that just has nothing but undisclosed injuries. But if you look at, there was a point where on tape you can see Matthew Tkachuk with his, he kind of pointed to his hip after he hit the crossbar, and he was on the bench to point to the trainers. And then Brady went knee to knee, literally, against Finland, I believe it was. And so that was a little bit more obvious, but those guys are going to be playing hurt. So Quinn Hughes, who we thought was going to come to the rescue, not going to happen. And that goes back to the weirdness of the rules and the regulations and how they put all this together. It does seem like there's an element of these guys are putting things out on the fly because this is kind of the first of its kind tournament for them. They're putting this together this year, and who knows if we'll see it again. So Quinn Hughes not coming to the rescue for Team USA. The Tkachuk brothers, two of the heart and soul members of that forward group, playing hurt. McAvoy out. So you've got injuries. You still have Hellebuck in net, but you've got injuries to your forward line and some of your defensemen that might not make it as easy to kind of rough up and muscle around Team Canada the way that you did before, which is why I think you'll see a more measured approach from Team USA. I think they're going to be physical. I think they're going to be aggressive, but I think they're going to be measured, because if there's one thing that you don't want to do when you're a little undermanned, is give your opponent any more advantage than they already need. And Team Canada is so top heavy on their first couple of lines when you look at Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon, and you'll have Cale Makar and the like. You can't give those guys any other opportunity to take advantage of areas where you're already struggling a little bit compared to the last matchup. So I think you'll see Team USA make a concerted effort to stay physical and stay fast, but stay out of the box. And I think that's going to be important for them. And so I think, based on all the metrics, I mean, you've got Team Canada, who's got all of the onus on them to respond after the beating that they took in the first game, losing 3-1 in very physical fashion. The rubber match is on U.S. soil, but I think that just in the same way that Team USA went in and bullied them in Montreal, I don't think it's that big of a stretch for Team Canada and a lot of these NHL stars to come into Beantown, into Boston, and do the same thing. It weirdly feels like, if you just look at the game without any emotion, that things might slant Team Canada's way. And so I think that might be a smart bet if you're looking at it in that direction. But I'm not, because the reason I'm a terrible gambler is I still like to gamble with my heart. So Team Canada, if you were to run this simulation through, 100 times, Canada might win 99. But to quote the late, great Herb Brooks, not tonight. Tonight, Team USA is going to skate with them. Tonight, they're going to stay with them. And tonight, Team USA will prove that they are the greatest hockey nation in the world. I don't have a score prediction for you, because you never know how these are going to go, but I know it's going to be entertaining, and I can't wait to watch. Thank you also all so much for joining me today. I can't wait to react to this game and so much more as the NBA and the NHL get back into the swing of things. Shortly, the NFL offseason rolls on. We're so close to the scouting combine, and then right after that, it'll be free agency, NFL draft. Then, you know what? We're going to look up and blink, and training camp for the 2025 season will be upon us. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will catch you all at the exact same place at the exact same time tomorrow. I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.